Good day, and welcome back to Tech Tips, Fixes, and More. I'm Ron, and today I'm going to be working on a moving head theatrical light. You may have seen it in one of my recent videos. After doing some research online, I found that several manufacturers make very similar lights to this. Each of them are only slightly different. These lights are considered zoom wash lights. They have 19 sets of red, green, blue, and white LEDs, and each of these is capable of 15 watts of power. The light head is motorized in two planes. It moves horizontally in a circle and vertically as well. And the multifaceted lens in front of the LEDs moves in and out under motor control to make the beam wider or narrower. These lights are pretty flexible and can be used in lots of different applications. They have a small user interface on the base where you can set them up to respond to sound, step through pre-configured sequences, or you can select DMX operation and control them with a lighting control board or a computer. This light came to me originally because the owner said it wasn't working at all, and we talked, and it looked like maybe their DMX communications wasn't working properly. And anyways, I checked it out and it seemed to be fine, so I sent it back. The next time they tried it, the DMX cables going into the light got hot, and they said that it smelled like something was burning, so they sent it back to me again, and I checked it out again, but again it worked fine for me. I should say that I noticed the waveforms of the DMX, which electrically are actually the same as RS-45 signals, looked a bit attenuated on one side of the line, and I should have pursued that, but it seemed to be working. It was in spec, so I sent it back to them again. This time when they connected it to the DMX daisy chain, it stopped all the other lights from working. It just killed the communications. So this time I got it back again. I hooked it up to my system and it didn't work. And that's where we're going to pick up the video. So what I basically got happening here is just that I've got the USB coming out of the USB port. I'm connecting across to my DMX interface. On the DMX interface you can see that there is a power LED lit up here, and you can also see a flashing communications LED. So that's telling us that the computer is sending data to the DMX converter, or the USB to DMX converter. From the USB to RS-485 or DMX converter, what we have is a cable going to the input, or the DMX in on the light, and the DMX in is using an XLR-F cable. That's interesting. It's got a life of its own there. So this plugs in the DMX. And this connector here is what's called a PowerCon connector. It's very similar to Speakon connectors, but they are not compatible with each other, which is good because we never want to be able to plug in AC into a speaker. So these are keyed differently, these connectors, but they look similar from the outside. I've got my scope hooked onto the two outputs of the RS-45 output on this. And those should be a mirror image. The A and B output of an RS-485 interface are basically two 5-volt signals that are operating in reverse polarity. And so when I hooked it up this time, here's the waveform I got. The yellow waveform is the, I believe it's the A output. That's the the A trace, or the number 1 trace on the scope, and the purple or pinkish colored trace is actually the other side, and it should be showing an exact mirror image of the first one. And you'll notice that we've just got noise slightly above ground. Now that wasn't what I saw the last time I looked at this light, and so it appears to me that something has gotten worse. The light is not working at all right now, so I'm going to open the thing up, because I suspect that we have a problem with the RS-485 transceiver chip in there. You'll notice now that I've disconnected the light from the USB to DMX converter, that my signals are now correct. They're mirror images of each other. So that would again confirm to me that the light, probably the transceiver in the light, is loading down that signal and causing it to not communicate properly. Well, this is interesting. There was a point in time when the customer told me that the last time he used it, he could smell a burnt smell coming from this light. And because the light was working for me at the time, we thought maybe the burnt smell was coming from something else, maybe the AC power controller that they were using. It was adjacent to it, and they thought maybe it got hot. But in opening this up, I see that there is evidence of something getting hot on the input. Here's the input, and here's the connector. Let's see if we can get you a close-up of what is in here. So as you can see, that connector right there has gotten hot, and there's been some melting happening there. So definitely something has gone wrong. That is connected across to the board on the far side, and I'm probably going to have to get access to that. But I'm going to take it apart anyways, just in case there's even a short in the wiring. Ooh, that's pretty crunchy. Oh boy, that wasn't really how that was supposed to work, I don't think. Okay, so the connector came right off. We better take a look at the other side, just to see if we've got the same kind of damage maybe on the printed circuit board. I'll just clip a tie wrap here so that I can get at this. This is the cable in question. Doesn't appear to be any sign of heat damage over on this side. First I'll desolder those pins. Okay, let's just maybe give this a little bit of a try with it still apart. Okay, I'm going to plug in the power, being careful. Let's take a look at that waveform. Oh yeah. It dropped down right away. So I would suspect that we still need to replace that Max 485 chip. So here is the Max 485 chip right here. There we go, we've got it off. There may be a problem with not having enough flux in that for everything to flow, so I'm going to try and add just a little bit of this chip quick, it's called. It's a combination of solder and flux. When you heat this thing up, the surface tension of the molten solder should pull it back onto the tabs. One of the tricks to this I've found is getting set up in such a way that you can hold it steady. I think that's got it. We will see. First of all, we'll just try plugging directly in and see if it loads it down again. Okay, so after all of that, it looks to me like we had a problem with a short in the wire going to this XLR connector. But now I've got it plugged in where our signal is not dropping down. And I'm going to see if I can control it from the computer. Okay, so this one's given me a bit of a merry chase, and some of it was my own fault. I'll try and recap what's happened. So I got this thing back and there was nothing working at all. When I connected it up, I could see that one side of the RS-485 line was basically shorted to ground, the other one was okay. So when I went looking, I found that burnt connector, and it would appear to me that probably the RS-45 line was shorted somewhere along the line and caused that to happen. So I pulled that connector off, cut off the connector, and resoldered it on, and it still did not work. And this is where I kind of made my mistake. I assumed that because that was still not working, that the RS-45 chip was bad, and it may have been. So I changed the 485 chip, and it still didn't work. Then I realized that the short, there was this at the connector, at the DMX input connector, there was actually a short farther down the line. Things had melted enough that the ground had actually shorted to one side of the line. And so I had to cut that off and shorten it up, and resoldered that, and that would have solved the problem, except for I believe I put the RS-45 chip in backwards. Now that seems like a pretty dumb mistake, but as it turns out, these chips, there's a correct way around and a wrong way around, and there's a way of telling which pin is pin number 1, and on these particular chips that was not obvious. Normally there's either a little divot in one end of the chip, or there's a little indentation by pin 1, and neither of those was present on this chip. The only thing I could go by was the silk screening, and I think that was not a valid indication, so I accidentally got the chip in the wrong way around. And I'm not sure at this point how you're supposed to tell where pin 1 is on those little surface mount chips, but I'll have to do a little research on that. So I actually turned the chip around, resoldered it, which in itself is a challenge, and when I had done that, things started working. So that was a big relief, and it now does work. I'll just show you how the light can be controlled. There's the horizontal axis, there's the vertical axis, and there's one of the colors changing. And of course there's more that you can do with that. You'll also notice on the screen that the waveforms are a mirror of each other, and there are full 5 volts on each one of them. So that's what we were looking for. So I think we have solved the problem, and it took the long way around to do it in a way, but not having used those surface mount chips that much, I'm going to forgive myself for the mistake I made. Okay, so I'm going to button this thing up, and I'll give it one more test before I actually give it back to the customer, but I hope that this is going to solve this problem once and for all. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of my videos here. Be glad to get a like and a subscribe from you, and if you'd like to give me some comments, always appreciate positive comments. And as I've said before, I can't fix everything, but I know the guy who can fix everything, and we can talk about that again on another video. Thanks for tuning in.